These are odd times in which we find ourselves. Restricted to our local areas, it can be hard to get out on a good adventure. In a bid to keep my spirits up, I've been looking for some local adventures, somewhere a wee bit different. Today, I'm following a 200-year-old route that will tickle the boundaries of the current lockdown restrictions. I'll be winding my way through the historic county of West Lothian, from the River Avon in the west to the River Amond on its eastern edge, guided all the way by the Union Canal. The adventure begins at the Avon Aqueduct, which carries the canal high above the River Avon. It's the longest aqueduct in Scotland and second in the UK. I'd picked a perfect day for it. The canal was still and glass-like. Not your typical Scottish winter's day. It was time to begin the long march. I started heading east across the cobblestone path and off the aqueduct, heading in the direction of Linlithgow. Now this route is about 13.5 miles long, so it's a one-way trip. Manageable in a single day, if you have enough sunlight, that is. It was the middle of winter, but the sun seemed to have forgotten that fact and was bathing the trees with warmth and golden sunlight. It was quiet, calm, and peaceful. But that was soon to change. The still waters of the canal were soon being pierced by kayakers. And the canal path was growing busier. There was activity all around. About 1.5 miles later, and I had reached the historic town of Linlithgow. The famous palace and church nestled impressively by the lochside. My time in Linlithgow was short but sweet. I headed eastward from the town and back into the countryside. Something that really stands out along the canal at this time of year is the abundance of berries. The trees are laden with thousands of them, twinkling in the sunlight like sweets in a sweet shop. And there are plenty of customers, eager to snap up some of the rounded red morsels. This female blackbird, taking her time to browse the selection. She was soon joined by others. As the sun rose higher, the competition started to heat up, the smaller birds being swept aside by the larger ones. A field fair, taking her time to have a good look around. It was soon joined by a redwing, who looked to have already eaten a berry or two. After relieving himself, and regurgitating a few more berries. It was time for him to be on his way. It was also time for me to get a move on. The sunlight is scarce on these short November days. The sun was spreading its golden glow across the landscape. A perfect winter's day. Everyone was out enjoying it. One notable absence were the canal boats you'd normally see, chugging merrily along. Unfortunately, a large section of the canal, not far from where I started, was closed after the walls were breached a few months ago by bad weather. Hopefully, it won't be too long until canal life can return to normal. I was approaching an area that I'd never ventured to before, the Bings of Philipston. You're never far from civilization on the canal, but here it felt like you were out in the wilderness. It had a spooky atmosphere about it. The canal lay in the shadow cast by the steep Bings at its edge, and the crystal clear water had now been covered by a thick layer of green sludge. It looked like nothing had paddled through here for a long while. Walkers were non-existent, and cyclists were few and far between. And that's when I began to hear some strange sounds coming from behind the trees. Faint at first, but growing louder, getting closer. It was a gaggle of geese, at least a couple hundred strong. The sound was absolutely deafening. I eventually left the shadowy lands behind, heading under a bridge and back into the light. I was approaching Winchborough, the telltale sounds of construction betraying its presence. I'd never been before, but had heard about the large house building projects going on in the area. The canal path is pretty good, mostly tarmac. It's ideal for cycling along. There are a few sections like this one through Winchborough that are a little muddier, so be prepared to have to wash down your bike after. If you're not into hill walking, you can't get much flatter than this. In fact, the canal is exactly 73 metres above sea level, along its entire length, flat as a pancake. The short visit to Winchborough was now over, and once again, I was back into the countryside, headed towards Broxburn. The town gets its name from the Gaelic word broch, meaning badger, and of course, the burn that runs through the middle. The most notable feature of Broxburn are the giant red bings that surround it, left over from the shale oil industry, now slowly being reclaimed by nature. Strange markings scarred the side of the bings, and it wasn't long until I found the source. The Pentland Hills lined the horizon, currently out of my reach due to lockdown. It wasn't too long until I had reached Broxburn. Due to my miscalculations on the amount of sunlight I had left, I had to call it a day. Determined to complete the walk, I would return the next day to finish it. The next day felt much more like winter, with a cold, thick fog hanging in the air. This didn't dissuade the creatures of the canal though. They didn't seem to mind. The deer scuttled off into the distance, while the bird kingdom was being watched over by a buzzard sitting high on his throne. I headed through the Pigeon Cave and out of Broxburn towards the final destination of the Linns Mill Aqueduct. I soon approached a sculpture dedicated to the planet Saturn, part of the Kirkhill Pillar project that has various sculptures scattered around West Lothian, representing a scaled down version of the solar system. The background din that had been audible since Broxburn had now become a roar as I approached the M8 motorway. This new bridge was built in the year 2000 as part of the Millennium Link project to reopen the canal, which had previously been cut in two by the motorway. Not far now, a few more twists and turns, and I had finally reached my destination. Linns Mill Aqueduct, across the River Amond, the eastern edge of West Lothian. Every bit as impressive as the Avon Aqueduct, where my journey began. It had been an interesting wee adventure. My only regret is that I hadn't done it sooner. The canal bustling with wildlife at every turn. You never quite know what's waiting for you around the next corner. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you all next time.